stories, how you use them.
T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to the Biz Doc Podcast. We're here to unlock your brain and give you news you can use, some stats that you can apply to whatever you're doing. As I like to say, whether you're running a t-shirt company in Berlin or a tech company here in the United States, it's time to unlock your brain. You can also unlock your brain with Vault. Go to Amazon.com, get the Vault beverage. We love it. Watermelon, black cherry, and cucumber mint, one of my favorites. Onward. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the housing market and basically how expensive it is and the rental market and what that means for you. Then we're going to dive into some very interesting supporting stats around credit card delinquencies. And then I'm going to wrap it up. I got a very exciting case study today on Cruise Taxi. This is the driverless taxi that was founded in San Francisco, and it is in the news because things are not going well for the cruise people. Businesses today are facing a rough world. The stock market is in an angry mood, as is the economy. Banks are failing, inflation is never ending, and a looming recession threatens to wipe out stock value. That's bad for business, but even worse for retirement funds, especially if you're the one getting ready to retire. And to make things worse, the government is targeting those retirement funds, your 401ks and your IRAs, with heavy new taxes to pay for things like social justice agendas and federal deficits. The good news is that there is a way to help protect your financial future: investing in precious metals. American Hartford Gold will ship physical gold and silver directly to your door. Or they can set you up with a gold IRA, where you can invest in gold that shows up in your IRA. The Gold IRA can shield your wealth from this economic meltdown, and the best part is this method is tax and penalty free. That's right. Analysts predict that gold is set to hit all-time highs. If you have retirement funds that you cannot afford to lose, now is the time to call a precious metal dealer. And here is the only precious metal dealer that I, the Biz Doc, currently trust: American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio from stocks, mutual funds, and other things with physical gold and silver. With the finest products, fantastic customer service, and a buyback commitment, American Hartford Gold has earned a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Tell them the Biz Doc sent you, and they'll give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first order. Click the link in the description below or call 866-535-0767. Again, on your screen, 866-535-0767, or just text BIZ, B-I-Z, to 65532. So that's what we got today. Very exciting. I'm very anxious to cover all this. I think it's going to be very interesting to you. So let's go to the first chart here. First chart. So we're going to stay on this for a little while here and talk about it here. This is basically the income needed to buy a house, and this is coming from, a lot of good government stats. I don't know if you can say good and government in the same sentence, but nonetheless, these are stats that are in here that are validated. And so here's what we got. So you've got the housing market basically showing the kind of dollars of income that it needs to afford the average house. Remember, this is a national average. Going to be higher in Beverly Hills, going to be higher in Fisher Island, going to be higher in down in Miami, going to be higher in Greenwich, Connecticut. But nonetheless, on a national average, this tends to stand true when you take away the super high-end markets for the average market and the average community in an average American city or town. So basically, if you take a look here, right now, look at that spike that has just happened right now in 2022 to 2023. And we're filming this here just at the start of Q4 2023. Look at that. $111,000 that needed to afford a house. Now there's two blend points here. The first is, what are the interest rates that relate to the mortgage, which it's going to relate to the price that you're paying each month for living in the house. The second part is the cost of the house itself, the asset value, the price of the house. And houses are up at least 30% on a national basis going back to 2021, where we had this huge spike as a result of, boom, printing all that money that went into circulation as part of the stimulus checks during the COVID response by the US government. That caused asset prices to go up, that caused housing prices to go up. Then through 2022, what do? We've been raising interest rates, and we've raised them up to the point now that the mortgages right now are about 7.5, 7.75, or even 8, depending on your credit score. So right now you're hovering very close to 8%. Well, when you put a high price of the house and the mortgage rate is way up, the mortgage payment is way up. Oops, so that translates into what it takes to afford a house. Right now, it's $111,000 a year it takes to afford a house. Now, if you back up just 2 years, you are down there at $65,000. If you see, you got 3 yellow bars there, 1, 2, 3. If you're in your car and you're watching, you're listening, on Spotify or whatever, listening to this on the audio version of the podcast, we're looking at a chart here that suddenly jumps up in 2023 to 110, meaning 110,000, and just 2 years, less than 2 years actually, prior, that was only about 65,000 it took to afford a house. And 2 years before that, pre-COVID, we were hovering in the high 40,000, low 50,000 range of what it would take to afford a house in the United States of America. Now, we go back to the financial crisis. You follow the chart back, it kind of levels out, and you go back to 2008, 2009, time of the financial crisis when all the fun happened. If you want to know how that went down, you can go do some research or watch The Big Short. Remember, that's Hollywood's movie talking about it, but the core timeline in the movie that they have is correct, and what happened there with the terrible financial crisis led by the real estate bubble in 2008. So you go back and look at that. Now then, what's the best course? People say, I've been seeing this in the headline. Wall Street Journal's had it in the headline. Average newspapers, online have had it in the headline. Yahoo News has had it in the headline. So pretty much everybody, whether you're watching the Wall Street Journal or you're not paying attention, you're just seeing regular daily news, people are noticing this. This is showing up in news feeds as a casual news story on Facebook. So America is hearing this, and there's a lot of people that have been sending in comments that said, Biz Doc, what do? I've been seeing this. This is when will it go the other way and be a good time and be more affordable for me, because my income didn't go from 65 to 110 in 2 years after the COVID response. Glad you asked. Look, now is the time to be patient and to be efficient with your dollars. And basically, there are good markets out there, and there are markets where the price has dropped down a bit. Many areas outside San Diego, California, we're seeing listings that have really dropped back down to 2021 levels and pre-2021 levels. So there may be markets, depending on where your job or your life has you, that you can actually buy a house right now. But you have to be able to afford that 7.75% mortgage, give or take, maybe closer to 7.5, depending on what week it is, maybe a little over 8 if your credit is only around 650, 690, something like that. Nonetheless, there may be markets you can afford it. But don't buy into the, I'm just going to squeeze myself, and I'm going to squeeze myself for 6 months, and then rates are going to come down, I can refi. No, don't assume that. Yes, this week the Fed said we're not raising rates right now, and I'm talking about this week, beginning of 1 month into Q4, Halloween, November 1st, the United States Fed met and said we're not raising interest rates at this time, and might as well just assume that we won't unless there's some really cataclysmic things that happen in the economy going to the end of the year and the beginning of next year. We're probably going to stand pat, meaning leave the interest rates where they are going through Q1 into Q2 of next year, maybe even the June meeting of the Fed, which is 8 months from now, when they come down. So, moral of the story, if you're in a market that you can afford and you can get into a house right now, God bless you. If that's what your decision is, but don't pinch your budget and assume, I'm just going to refi in a couple months when the rates come crashing down, because it doesn't look like they're going to crash down. It looks like they're going to be gently going down. So you should assume that rates aren't going to move down meaningfully where you give about a point difference in your loan. So you say, I have a 7.75. Rates are down to 6.5. If I can get a no point, no fee refinance, maybe I could do that. Meaning you don't have to pay money to refinance, because that defeats the purpose of reducing your payment if you just end up paying $2,000, which is like $200 a month. I saved $200 a month. Yeah, but you paid $2,000, $2,400 to refi. So there's You just paid it up front. You see what I mean? I know it's a longer term play and the interest rate's going to be down for the life of the loan and all that, but you have to be sensible about what the refi is and what it does and whether it makes sense for you to do it right now. So the other thing is, don't buy into the hype. For the longest amount of time, oh, you got to buy a house, got to buy a house, got to buy a house, because it's an asset and the price is going to go up. First of all, when you look at the prices on a national basis where we are right now, you can't assume that the prices are going to keep going up from there, because if people can't afford it today and their income hasn't come up, so you're telling me that interest rates come down, but the price of the home keeps going up, meaning you buy a home and it keeps going up in value and it's like a piggy bank or a savings account for you, you got the same problem on the other side. So remember, if you are not in a house right now, and by that I mean a piece of property, a townhouse, a condo, or a small home, having purchased something, if you're not in it right now, remember, you're not handcuffed to an asset that has recently gone up as much as 33% more in certain parts of the country, and that includes higher insurance, that includes higher property taxes. So if you are able to afford a house that's at a higher price recently, remember, with that higher price, when you buy it, comes higher property tax and higher cost of insurance, because insurance relates to the cost of replacing it in the event of a fire, and the value of the house translates to the premium of the insurance. Just like having a more expensive car, your car insurance is higher than having a less expensive car. You know, you have to respond to all those underlying costs on it. You have to insure it. You have the maintenance on it. So if you're not in a house right now, do not feel bad and do not buy into the hype. Do not be guilted into somehow you're left behind, because as a renter, you have more options now. You have the options, if you're not married or you're not in a long-term relationship, don't have any kids, something like that, you have the option to have a roommate. Now, having a sane roommate is not an invasion of privacy. It's an economic benefit. It can be an economic benefit so that you're renting for a while, saving your money, being conservative, letting the economy flow through, but don't buy into the hype that you are somehow less or left behind. I've been hearing that, and I've been people talking to me, well, I feel so bad because I'm just a renter. You're not just a renter. You're a person who is taking economic control of your life, and you're saving your dollars, and you're waiting to these waves to come back. Will housing prices come down? We hope they come down somewhat. Will mortgage rates come down meaningfully mid-year next year? We hope somewhat. We also have the presidential election in the United States coming up in the November, fourth quarter of next year. And around presidential elections, there's all kinds of gamesmanship, manipulation with economic data. And maybe that helps, you know, interest rates on mortgages come down. Maybe there's government pressure behind the scenes because they're going to want the economy to look better so that you'll vote for them or vote for them. But don't buy into the hype. Don't buy into the hype. Rent, be efficient with your dollars, and just get smart about what is happening with the world around you in terms of the economics of owning a house. Get smart about it. Make this next year a year where you are basically going to college on what it is to own a house in an increasing cost environment, especially if it's going to be a first-time home buying opportunity for you. And I'll tell you, not everybody is doing well in this economy. And I'd like to transition to the next topic. Take a look at this. This is the credit card delinquencies. Take a look at that. If you're listening in your car or you're on the audio version on Spotify, let me describe it. What we have here is a chart that starts in 1991, and it shows a red line going up and down with the amount of credit card delinquencies. And we suddenly, at the end of 21, the beginning of 22, delinquencies have shot up. The delinquency rate is 50% higher today than it was 12 months ago. Let me say that again. If you're a bank and you have given credit cards out to people, and last year there was 100 people delinquent per month, let's just say. Right now, it's 150 people delinquent per month, which means that inflation and the economy is having a pinch effect on people, and all the more reason that you should be on top of your economic game to ensure that you are in a safe and, as we say, warm, dry, well-fed, and safe place with your finances and stretching into a house that's somewhat higher priced, and the high interest rates right now, I wouldn't do that. And you can see people around you with the credit card delinquency rates going up. What's up with that? It's because it's not just housing that's up. Inflation has brought everything in the economy up. So I hope that's helpful today. I hope these charts were helpful. And again, if you're listening or just driving with us, hope I've been able to describe them so you can understand what's going on as well. Now, very interesting stuff. Cruise taxi. Cruise taxi is driverless taxis, which is now owned by GM, and they've been in the headlines recently. And I'm going to go over to Studio B, and we're going to go dive into the history of cruise, what's happened recently, and there's some big lessons in there for you and me that when you have a crisis at your business, how's the best way to deal with it. All right, let's go find Studio B and get into the case study. All right, I found my board. Put my vault down here. All right. There have been some headlines recently about driverless taxis in San Francisco, and the company that's in those headlines is Cruise. We are now going to dive into Cruise a little bit and talk a little bit about what happened and how you can respond when there's crisis in your business. So first, let's go a little history so you get a little backdrop here. Cruise was founded in San Francisco by these two guys. Back in October of 2013, they went through a thing called Y Combinator, which is an accelerator incubator in San Francisco that you have to apply to get into. And they had a vision for driverless cars that would be fuel efficient and also run all day, different kind of cost structure, and providing services to America without drivers, which is basically labor replacement. And using smart strategy and smart GPS to determine optimal routes. So hopefully you've got benefits and things happening on time with well-timed taxi drives and all that. That was the theory. So Kyle and Dan, right here behind me, Kyle being from MIT, the CEO and founder, and Dan, who is sort of a chief product officer, they went out and did it after meeting in college. They were working internships and at Justin TV, which would become Twitch. So they get some money together and they start off with Cruise. Well, the first thing you have with these, and on my case studies, I like to dive into this a little bit and take you on a journey. First, let's take a look at the money. After being founded in October 2013 Y Combinator, they get a California permit to test driverless cars right around in 2015. Then they would be acquired by GM in March of 2016. Wow, this company, young but good enough for California to give them a permit to do testing on driverless cars. GM sees the future and they're like, hang on, I think we'd like to be part of this, and they actually bought the company. I've heard 500 million, I've heard $1 billion. Regardless, it was a real number and it wasn't a distress sale, and GM was trying to get in before things got really heated up and before the value went up. So away they go. Now, the early investment up to the GM, acquisition looked like this. They had about 4.3 million in seed, because when you say, hey, we're a Y Combinator graduate, that's a highly credible thing. And away they go, and they score 4.3 million at that time, March 2014. A little over a year and a half later, they did a Series A, 12.5. Now that's real money there. Then GM came in with the acquisition shortly thereafter, and they put 14 million in. So now they got enough money to do their research and to take that permit to start testing the technology that would eventually become the cars. Remember, that's not a permit to actually be on the road picking you and me up. That's only a permit to do testing in a limited way, and also having a backup human driver in the car in case something goes wrong. But nonetheless, they're building the technology and they're testing it. Well, soon after GM buys them, 2018, 2021, I call this the chapter of go big or go home, because big dollars came in so they could do big research, building technology platform, and they're buying cars, equipment, the hardware that went with it, and developing that hardware. And in May of 2018, they got $2.5 billion from SoftBank's Vision Fund. That is a lot of money. They also got $1.1 billion from GM. So by definition, just with cash in the bank, they're a triple unicorn at this time. And so this is a big deal, thinking this is going to be driverless taxis everywhere. GM owns it. They're going to be selling the cars, the technology. Division of GM. Here we go, off and running. Then October, November, here's what happened. They had $750 million come in from Honda, who also said that we want to put $2 billion in the future because we like this idea for Tokyo and major Japanese cities. We'd like to see it there. And they brought him a new CEO that came from a division of GM, not a surprise there, with these kind of big dollars here. And these guys recently out of college, smart as they were, GM put one of its own folks, as they say, an adult in the room, and Dan Amnan became the CEO. Then, May of 2019, check this out. They announced that they had another $1.15 billion come in at a valuation of $19 billion. So this thing's almost worth $20 billion. That is very big and very real money. Then, January 21, Microsoft and Honda. Remember, Honda said that they would put more in the future? There's the future. January 21, joining Microsoft, kicking the valuation from just within 2 years, going another 50% from $19 billion to $30 billion. So now you have a $30 billion company with expectations as high as the valuation. Takes us to 2022, the year of deployment. So here they go. February of 22, they say, hey, we're open to the public, whatever that meant. March of 22, GM went and they acquired SoftBank's equity and they invested $1.35 billion more. So now SoftBank is out and GM is buying one of the early big investors out so that they could have more ownership unto themselves. Then in June, California moves the permit up to deploy, permit to test with all the technology they were doing, permit to test. Again, no real drivers, no real routes, no real passengers. You have to have your own driver in there, all those things on test. Now they move it up to deploy driverless vehicles. No sooner than they get the permit to deploy, then they have to recall the 80 vehicles and completely change the software apparently because they had a crash. So that's bad. Then in August, San Francisco petitioned back to the state of California that said, hey, we're the city where these things are testing. You're giving them a permit and these things are going to be in our city. And we don't think that this cake is completely cooked yet. And we protest this. And so San Francisco was objecting to what was happening with Cruise having a permit to actually deploy because the state of California and Sacramento gave them the permit, but Cruise was based in San Francisco and city of San Francisco, police, fire, and city hall were like, hey, we don't think this is ready. We're seeing things. We're watching them. We think this permit is premature to actually being able to deploy. That was 2022. So you can see, the year starts with fanfare, but it ends with question marks and a recall in between. Nonetheless, by September, San Francisco's got a fleet of 100 driverless cruises out there. Then, the vision forward in competition. They had also announced that they were going to have driverless taxis coming to Japan. They announced that they would be testing in Austin, Dallas, Houston, and Miami. They said Uber and Lyft, they said, hey, we're going to be the play here because Uber and Lyft have actually abandoned self-driving development. In other words, they're operating Uber and Lyft as you and I know it today, and maybe someday they would use self-driving vehicles that they would, purvey from maybe someone like Cruise under a contract. But Uber and Lyft said, we're not spending the money on self-driving development. That's a large technology investment. We're not doing that. Keep also in mind that Uber and Lyft are public, trying to turn a profit. So we're turning a profit doing this, and it's been tough for them to do. If you know the history of Uber and Lyft, profits have not come easy. So while you're trying to generate a profit and positive PE on Wall Street and then say that you're investing billions in self-driving development, no. So both Uber and Lyft said they weren't doing it. So most people thought that was a good thing. Hey, Cruise and Waymo, which is owned by Google or Alphabet, maybe that clears the way for them to be the self-driving leaders. As I said, Waymo. Then they showed this. This is a city taxi for Tokyo. Kind of cool. The sides open up and up to 4 people or 6 people, depending on the configuration, can fit in there. So nonetheless, the Cruise technology, you've got, saying in Japan that these very interesting, city vehicles, and if you've been to Tokyo, it's very technologically advanced, really neat things going on all the time. And that taxi there would fit in Tokyo perfectly, and they said it's coming in 2026. So with the issues that we're having trying to do test and deployment, they were still out there talking about vision and everything they're doing for the future. Then, this year happened. Here's what happened. Summer drama in San Francisco. First, 10 Cruise vehicles stopped functioning in the middle of a busy street. And apparently all of their software became confused and they locked down the street, and there was more than one vehicle. Do I go? Do I not go? Do I go? And the police are like, what the hell do we do here? These unmanned robot cars are stuck. So that wasn't good. Happened in North Beach. Then a few days later, a Cruise vehicle drove right into a construction zone and got stuck in wet concrete. This is like a comedy movie or a cartoon, where people go running, they get stuck in the concrete and they can't move. Well, guess what? That really happened. It drove right into a construction zone. These guys are diving for cover and the Cruise suddenly was stuck in wet concrete. Yeah, pretty embarrassing. Then it got really bad. So you may think that this is kind of comical, and a degree it is, until you think, what happens if there's a person that's there? Well, it did happen. Fortunately, it wasn't a fatality, but this is what happened. There is a vehicle, that was stopped, and apparently the Cruise taxi stopped for some incident, but then it thought it needed to move out of traffic, and it hit a woman and dragged her 20 feet on the ground. They got the vehicle to stop. Some people that were there stood in front of the vehicle, and apparently it sensed it and it stopped. And they got the fire department out there that had to use all this equipment to lift this thing up and extract this woman from beneath the vehicle. Well, fortunately, she didn't die, but unfortunately, she's in the hospital with extremely serious injuries. And then the city of San Francisco is like to Sacramento, I told you, we got them stuck in wet concrete, we got them stopping on city streets, and now somebody's been hit. And so, big issues. So guess what? They announced they had to suspend operation. But a closer look wasn't good. I'm going to read this to you, and what I have on screen here comes from a news story. The California Department of Motor Vehicles suspended the permits to deploy driverless vehicles. So California heard San Francisco and they pulled the permit. Now Cruise can't operate. They have no license to operate. Then they blamed the suspension on the employees of the San Francisco-based firm Cruise because they said you were hiding the full story behind the crash that left the pedestrian injured. So apparently the state of California was asking for information about what happened in San Francisco. Police and fire had photographs. A lot of things happened at the scene, and they were witnesses to what they encountered when they got there, and this woman is trapped under the Cruise taxi. Well, apparently the company did not cooperate fully with Sacramento, and the state was upset about that and said, you didn't tell us the whole story about the software, the glitch, whatever happened. And we're blaming the suspension on you because not only did your software glitch, not only did you have a problem, not only did someone get hurt, you didn't freaking cooperate with me. And driverless cars represent a risk unless your software is fully tested and is proving that you are mitigating the risk. Well, they also announced that any further deployment, they're going to have a human in the car. Wait a minute, this is a driverless taxi. If you take a taxi and put a person in it, isn't that an old school taxi? So you've sort of completely defeated the notion of driverless taxis with advanced software that always go on the right route and have lower costs for everybody because you don't have to pay a human. Well, if you're going to be forced to put a human in there for safety reasons, you no longer have a driverless company, you have an old school taxi. And away we go. So, but despite what's going on, GM says they're still confident that they'll get the software right, but this has been pulled back. They also pulled back in Austin, in Dallas, and Miami, where they were doing some testing there under permits. They have suspended all those operations on a national basis, the assumption being that they're working on their software and working on the things that have caused these glitches and problems. But General Motors said in Q3 of last year, 1 year ago, they believe this is ultimately going to be a product that works for them, but they had lost more than $5 billion since 2018 on research and development. Then just this year, they said that they've lost almost $2 billion just in the first 3 quarters of this year. But nonetheless, it says, we think this will be a $50 billion revenue producing division by the end of the decade, roughly 7 years. That's a big deal. So that's what GM thinks. So GM still thinks it's out there. But there's some lessons in here for you and me. And so within the story of Cruise, are we going to have driverless taxis? I think so. Are they going to take a big pause here and they go back to the software and the learnings? I think so, because they're not the first product to go out there and have glitches. Now, their glitches could be someone gets hit or a terrible accident happens, but products have glitches all the time. They get it right, have a little PR issue, and then they get off and running to the future. But for you and me, let's talk about this. Failing publicly requires candor, not denial. So regardless of what company you have, if you have something that has a failure or a problem and it impacts the public, maybe you're a restaurant and you have a little food poisoning issue and you had bad oysters from, you thought you had a good supplier. Look, you only have one chance to win those customers, and you have to have candor, not denial. You don't have to tell every little bit of the whole story and all the background of it, but you do have to have candor and not be denying it. You don't deny something's happened. You say, something has happened here. One of our food suppliers had an issue. We're going through everything. We're throwing everything out. We're testing the kitchen. We're going through doing all these things. That's candor. That's candor. Oh, I don't know if he really got sick here. We're going to look into it. No, that's spin. It can be an opportunity to make it right, and people say, hey, what happened there, I really liked it. When Chipotle had the food poisoning, they did it the wrong way. They didn't really indicate what ex-employees were saying, that they thought kitchen procedures and sanitation was the problem. Chipotle was blaming other things. Unfortunately, it really was Chipotle's kitchen that wasn't operating at the standards so that you and I could depend on getting one of those Chipotle burritos or bowls in such a way that it was safe to eat, and we wouldn't get 2-day food poisoning, which really is terrible. So, crisis communication 101. Be transparent with the authorities. So this is if you've got a product issue and there's something in the news. But if it's the authorities coming to visit you and people show up, you need to be transparent with the authorities, bring them into your conference room, and be clear and open with the media that's covering that. These are the things that are a lesson for you and me. It's be upfront and be smart. And there's great PR firms out there that will help you with crisis communication so you can do all these things so that the consumers, the media, and any authorities all feel that you've handled this in the right way. Even if you're at fault and you have to pay a fine or you have to go through some things, always do it that way. By the way, you can turn this internal. If you have an issue inside your company or a problem inside your company, dealing with candor, being transparent, and being upfront with people before they're putting it out on Glassdoor, because that becomes the media against your company. Glassdoor is like each person in your company becomes a reporter, and Glassdoor becomes the media. So the lessons for you and me: candor, transparency, gather your facts, and be clear about what you're doing is always the best policy. And Cruise needed a little bit more of that in San Francisco when this driverless taxi that they're putting in place, which looks like it's going to be a really interesting product, went from getting stuck in cement to blocking streets to actually hitting somebody. They could have done it better. All right, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to go back to the main studio and wrap up. All right, I hope that was useful information to you, especially how you can apply the lessons that Cruise had in your own business when it comes time to crisis and responding to just issues, because bumps in the road are going to happen to any business. And if you like that case study, check these out. There's a couple here you can click on from the Biz Doc Case Study Archive. Here at Valuetainment, we are dedicated to leaving you better than we found you, and there are a host of articles and links to other events, webinars, shows that are going to help you in your entrepreneurial journey, especially if you are a business owner trying to work through this economy. And you can go find all of those over at vt.com. A whole host of things, because as I like to say, we want to leave you better than we found you. And until next time, I'm Tom Melzer with the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.